The Democratic and Republican national conventions have finally come to an end, and now many voters are left wondering which candidate is better for Israel. Joining us today in the studio is Ambassador Arye Mekel to give us some more insight. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
So, to begin, can you tell us more about Hillary Clinton's perspective regarding Israel?
I know Hillary well because when I was Consul General in New York, she was the senator from New York. So she dealt with Israel all the time, whether she liked it or not. That's what you do in New York. And every Israeli politician who came wanted to meet her because she was the closest thing to royalty that they have. She still is. I believe that her views are similar to those of President Obama, namely as she served him for 4 years as Secretary of State and she was part of his policies. And they're also similar to those of her husband, President Clinton, when she was the First Lady. So I think basically we can expect the status quo if she's elected. But the thing is that things change so rapidly, especially in the Middle East. I mean, 8 years ago when President Obama came to office, who thought about ISIS? Who knew anything that such events would... So I would be very careful with trying to predict what she might or might not do. At this point, I think her thoughts are a lot like those of President Obama.
Now, you know, there are a lot of people that say Trump is a better friend for Israel. Is that a fair argument?
I would be very careful with these assessments. First of all, we always have to be bipartisan. This has always been the basis of our policies. It's a very dangerous game to try and intervene in American politics or try to say who is better or worse. We need to work with both parties. We have always done that. As far as Mr. Trump, he's totally unknown. I mean, he doesn't have a coherent international policy or a coherent policy on international affairs. He doesn't. So, and also things, again, will change. Who knows what will happen a year from now and what challenges he may face if he's elected president. So I think I would be very careful. Also, we have to remember, in the campaign, candidates tend to make all kinds of promises. For instance, President George W. Bush promised to move the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem.
Which we have not seen happen.
Did you recently, I mean, you are in Tel Aviv, but you visited Jerusalem. Did you visit the American embassy there?
I did not. It's still here in Tel Aviv.
And it will always be. So we also have to be careful about campaign declarations.
Absolutely. I mean, now, in your opinion, as an ambassador, as a veteran diplomat here, who do you really think is a better candidate for Israel?
But there's no such thing, because it all depends on the situation. I think we have to continue and cultivate our friends on both sides of the aisle. We have good contact, strong contact with Hillary and with her people. You know, no president does everything by himself, or this time by herself. This is impossible. It depends a lot on who you bring to the table, who is in your cabinet, who leads things.
So speaking about that, you know, we just saw that the Republican Party put out a new platform where they essentially failed to reference a two-state solution, and then we saw Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu come out and say that he is still in support of that two-state solution, despite the fact that Donald Trump and many other Republicans are claiming that this platform is the most pro-Israel it's ever been. What is your response to that?
You know, the official position of the government of Israel is that we support the two-state solution. Are we doing so much about it? I'm not so sure. But is it possible? It's probably impossible, because it is true that the other side is not ready for any compromises which are inevitable. But the platform, I wouldn't get too excited. I don't think there's one American who read this platform. I think even the people who wrote it probably each wrote a chapter, half a chapter. And the same in Israel. Anybody who's ever read the platform of the Likud or of the Labour Party, nobody knows what these platforms say, and nobody carries them out. So I wouldn't get too excited about anybody's platform, even if the platform would say, you know, the greatest thing on either side, Democrats or Republicans, I would take it with a very huge grain of salt.
Now, you mentioned this before. It's hard to know 100% whether or not a candidate is going to keep a promise that he's making in a campaign, right? But do you think there's any way that voters can look back at the history of both of the careers of the candidates we have right now to gauge whether or not they are going to keep the promises that they make about Israel?
Well, normally they can, but not this time. Hillary, you can, because she has a long history. She's been in the public eye at least since the early 90s. She was Secretary of State, Senator from New York. She made promises. She kept them or not. I mean, we can check. But Mr. Trump, there's no way to check because he was not in the public eye. He never made any promises regarding Israel or anything else in foreign relations. So there's no way to check if he kept them or not because he never made them. But he was not supposed to make them. He was just a private person, a businessman. So there's no way to check about Mr. Trump. About Hillary, most of the time when she made promises, she kept them. I mean, we have to take into account. When you are a senator from New York, you are very close with the Jewish community. Many of her top campaigners and donors and leaders. And we have to remember 80% of the American Jews will vote for Hillary. This is not unusual. 80% of the American Jews always vote for the Democrats. If a Republican candidate was ever able to get 25% of the vote, he was very lucky, very happy. It happened with Ronald Reagan in his second term, with George W. Bush in his second term because he was perceived as a friend of Israel. But most American Jews are Democrats and will continue to be Democrats.
So here's my final question for you. You know, we've seen statistics right now that are coming out that there's rising anti-Semitism across Europe and around the world. And Trump himself has been associated with different white supremacist leaders that have come out and essentially endorsed him. Is it fair to link him to these groups, and should the Jewish community be worried about any potential anti-Semitism in his campaign?
No, not at all. He's not connected to these groups. Maybe they said or they tried to embrace him, but he's not known for any of that. Again, Donald Trump comes from the city of New York. We know what that means as far as the Jews who live there, their standing in society, the associates. Donald Trump, if he were here, he would tell us, as he does all over again, all the time, that his daughter converted, that his grandchildren are Jewish. You know, he would push this. Now, there's no fear of any right-wing supremacy anywhere near Donald Trump. I speak to his advisors. I know some of them, foreign affairs advisors personally. I've known Trump for at least 10 years. No, I'm not concerned at all. Not at all.
Well, thank you so much for coming in, Ambassador, and giving us your insight. I think it's going to be a hard decision ahead for most of the voters in the United States. So
well, an election always is. Thank you, Natasha.
Exactly.